Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring something that really seems to hit home for a lot of people. Why do so many individuals, the ones labeled smart kids back in the day, often end up feeling kind of lost or unfulfilled as adults?
Yeah, and it's more than just feeling tired or burned out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It feels deeper, like a real psychological pattern. And where it comes from might actually surprise you.
That's right. And that's our mission for this deep dive, really, to try and deconstruct that whole smart kid identity.
Get under the hood a bit.
Yeah, figure out why it happens, and maybe more importantly, what we can all learn from it. We'll be pulling from some, foundational psychology here, trying to piece together the full picture from the sources we've looked at.
And hopefully this is going to be really valuable for you listening. Maybe you felt this yourself.
Or you know someone who fits this description.
Right. So this is kind of a shortcut to understanding the surprising roots of it all. Getting that knowledge quickly, but, properly.
Finding those aha moments.
Yeah. Without getting bogged down, making sense of a feeling that can honestly feel pretty isolating otherwise.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start. And interestingly, we're not starting in the classroom.
No.
We're going way back, childhood. According to the psychoanalyst Alice Miller, her book, The Drama of the Gifted Child from 1979, she says the root is this thing she called a false self. What does she mean by that exactly?
Well, what's really fascinating and maybe counterintuitive about Miller's work is how she defines gifted. It's not just about being super smart, like IQ points.
Okay.
It's often more about this exceptional sensitivity, an emotional attunement. This kid, from really early on, has this almost uncanny knack for sensing what their parents need.
Need emotionally.
Yeah, their unexpressed needs, their ambitions, maybe even their own anxieties. And the child learns, often without anyone realizing it, what the parents need them to be.
And they become that.
They mold themselves into that ideal because that's how they secure love and approval, which, for a child is, it's everything. It feels like survival.
Wow. So in doing that, the child is kind of denying themselves.
Yeah.
Pushing their own feelings down.
A profound act of self-denial, yeah. They learn to suppress authentic feelings, being unhappy, angry, sad, even just spontaneous joy sometimes, if it doesn't fit the role.
A good kid or smart kid role.
Exactly. Miller uses this image of locking those real emotions away in a glass cellar.
A glass cellar.
Yeah, and then tragically they lose the key. And that creates the false self, this persona. It's built for performance, for getting that external validation.
Okay, but Miller isn't saying the parents are being deliberately cruel.
No, that's crucial. She emphasizes this is often totally unconscious. It's like the air they breathed, she says. The parents probably went through similar things themselves.
Ah, so it's a pattern.
It's a pattern passed down. They genuinely think they're doing the best thing. They're proud of the child's achievements. They don't see that the child might be sacrificing their inner emotional world to get those achievements.
So the validation becomes conditional.
Completely. Love feels conditional, and that dynamic just repeats.
That transactional feel to love. That's got to leave a mark, hasn't it? What's the long-term consequence when love feels like something you earn?
Well, that's what creates what some call the primal wound of this whole paradox. The child starts to believe deep down that their worth isn't just there, it's conditional.
It depends on performance.
Depends on performing that role. Being smart, achieving things. Love isn't free, it's earned. And this isn't just a thought, it becomes like their operating system.
So every challenge feels like a threat.
A threat to your very value, yeah, not just to whether you succeed at the task. And that feeling many adults have of being a fraud.
Yeah, imposter syndrome, people call it.
Well, maybe it's deeper than that sometimes. Maybe it's the echo of knowing your sense of self was built for an audience, not from the inside out. You feel hollow because the show's over, but the actor's still playing the part. It really is a sense that who I am is a performance for others.
Okay, so this child, operating with this fragile, false self, then goes to school. And often they are smart. Their intelligence gets noticed, gets a label.
Right. Gifted, talented, bright spark.
And that label, even though it sounds positive, it sort of cements that dynamic, but adds new problems.
It absolutely amplifies it. and brings its own set of challenges. One big one is something called asynchronous development, meaning their brain power, their intellect zooms ahead, but their emotional maturity, their social skills, they lag behind.
Okay, you can see that.
So you might have a kid who can grasp really complex stuff like, I don't know, mortality or social injustice way before their friends, but they don't have the emotional tools yet to really deal with the feelings that brings up.
That sounds intense.
It leads to heightened emotional intensity, which is common in gifted adults, actually, feeling things more deeply. And that, plus just processing the world differently, often makes them feel like a total outsider.
Struggling to connect.
Yeah, finding peers who get them intellectually and emotionally, it's tough.
And it's weird, isn't it? Sometimes the systems meant to help these kids, like gifted programs, can actually make that isolation worse.
It can happen. You take a kid who was top of the class, you know, the big fish in their local school pond,
Yeah.
and you put them in an elite program with lots of other big fish. Suddenly, they're not the smartest anymore, maybe just average in that group.
Ouch. That could wreck their self-esteem if it's all built on being the smartest.
That's the big fish, little pond effect. It can be devastating. And then there's just the sheer weight of the gifted label itself.
The pressure.
Huge pressure. To live up to some perceived potential, it turns the gift into a burden. And that's fertile ground for really unhelpful perfectionism.
Where any mistake feels like a disaster.
Exactly. Because it proves you're not living up to the label. And studies looking at gifted adults long-term, they show something really interesting.
What's that?
Well, without a strong sense of purpose, they're actually at higher risk for a crisis of meaning. One study even found they reported lower levels of meaningfulness than people who were just high academic achievers, not necessarily labeled gifted.
Wow. So smarts alone aren't enough for happiness.
Doesn't seem like it. For this group, feeling happy often links back to something called generativity.
Meaning contributing.
Yeah, using their talents to help others contribute to something bigger than themselves. When their achievements feel disconnected from that, they can look successful on paper but feel totally lost inside.
So that really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. If raw intelligence doesn't guarantee well-being, what does make for a fulfilling life when you have that kind of capacity?
That's the big question. So, okay, so Miller helps us understand the origin, where this starts. But you mentioned the fragility. How does this identity become so brittle?
Right. That's where the work of Carol Dweck at Stanford comes in. Her research on mindsets really explains a key mechanism here. It connects that early praise to the kind of paralysis we often see later.
Okay, mindset. Tell us about that.
So Dweck found people tend to have one of two core beliefs about their abilities. First is a fixed mindset.
Fixed, meaning set in stone.
Pretty much. The belief that your intelligence, your talents, they're just innate traits. You've either got them or you don't. And if you have a fixed mindset, effort is actually seen as a bad thing.
Why bad?
Because if you have to try hard, it must mean you don't have the natural talent.
Ah, I see. And the other one?
The growth mindset. That's the belief that abilities can be developed through hard work, good strategies, learning from mistakes. This view makes you love learning, makes you resilient.
Okay, fixed versus growth. And how does this link to the smart kid?
Well, the smart kid is often, kind of unintentionally, the poster child for the dangers of a fixed mindset. Think about how they're praised.
You're so smart. You're a natural.
Exactly. It's praise for the trait, not the effort or the strategy or the persistence. And even though it's meant well, it teaches a really risky lesson.
Which is?
My value comes from being smart. That fixed quality, their whole identity gets tangled up with that label.
And then what happens when things get tough?
Then challenges stop being exciting chances to learn. They become threats. Potential exposure.
Exposures of not being smart enough.
Right. A hard assignment isn't just hard work. It's a test of their fundamental worth. If they cruise through it, fine, identity validated. But if they struggle, or make mistakes, or, God forbid, fail,
They take it as proof.
proof they aren't really smart after all. And because that feels so devastating, they start avoiding challenges where they're not sure they'll succeed easily.
They play it safe.
They stick to what they know they can ace. Protect the image rather than risk the struggle.
But that's terrible for actual growth, isn't it? Doesn't the brain need challenge?
Absolutely. Research shows our brains literally grow, make new connections when we grapple with difficult things. So by dodging the very struggles that build neurological muscle,
They stunt their own development.
they can inadvertently stunt both intellectual and emotional growth. It traps them, which leads right back to that feeling you mentioned.
The terror of not being the smartest person in the room.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the childhood origins, the mindset trap.
Hmm.
But how does this affect their overall journey? Like when they're teenagers, trying to figure out who they are,
Yeah.
does that stage get messed up too?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of being lost in adulthood. It often links back to getting stuck in a really critical developmental stage. We can bring in Erik Erikson here, his theory of psychosocial development.
Okay, Erickson, which stage are we talking about?
Stage 5, identity versus role confusion. Usually happens during adolescence.
Hmm.
And the big job, the core task for a teenager, is figuring out, who am I?
The big question.
The big one. It involves exploring, trying on different roles, different interests, figuring out your own values, maybe pushing back against what you were taught.
Finding your own path.
Yeah, and if you navigate that successfully, you come out with what Erikson called fidelity, basically. Knowing yourself, being true to yourself, which helps you form real connections. But if you don't,
Role confusion.
you're left with role confusion, feeling insecure, unsure, like you don't really fit anywhere, constantly uncertain.
And for the smart kid, why is this stage so difficult?
Well, think about it. Their identity wasn't really something they forged through their own exploration.
It was given to them, assigned.
Exactly. Building on Miller, it was the good child, the brilliant student, designed to meet those parental needs. Building on Dweck, it was solidified by praise for being the smart one. They didn't have to ask, who am I? Because everyone was telling them.
Their sense of self came from the outside.
Completely built on external validation within the predictable worlds of home and school.
But then those structures disappear.
And that's when the crisis hits. College, first job, just independent adult life. The world is way more complex, way more ambiguous. Being the smart one might not be special anymore, or even relevant.
And the old identity starts to crumble.
It cracks because they never did that messy internal work of building their own compass, trying things out, finding their own values. They're left adrift. Role confusion hits hard.
Moving from job to job, maybe, relationship to relationship.
Yeah, feeling insecure, confused about the future. And we know psychologically having a stable, well-formed identity is crucial for mental health, for real relationships. Without it, you feel fundamentally lost. It's that feeling of...
Being adrift with no internal compass to guide me.
Precisely.
Wow, okay. So it's
Yeah.
like these things all connect. They're not separate issues.
Not at all. They
Yeah.
absolutely connect. It's like a domino effect, really, a compounding cascade.
How so? Link it out for us.
Okay, so it starts with Miller's false self, right? This persona built to earn love. Now, that static persona needs a fixed mindset to survive.
Because its value is based on being smart, not learning.
Exactly. Effort or struggle feels like a threat that could expose the whole performance, risk losing approval. So the fixed mindset gets locked in.
Okay.
Then, that fixed mindset makes successfully navigating Erikson's identity stage basically impossible.
Why impossible?
Because identity formation requires exploration, taking risks, trying things out, maybe failing sometimes. All the stuff a fixed mindset is terrified of.
So they can't do the work needed to build a real self?
They can't.
Yeah.
So they just cling tighter to the only identity they have, the smart one. And that feeling of being lost as an adult, that's the sound of this whole developmental house of cards finally wobbling and collapsing when life gets real.
So it's not just one thing. It's a chain reaction. Each problem makes the next one worse.
It's a cascade.
We saw Miller's false self leading to that feeling of being a performance.
A sense that who I am is a performance for others.
Mm-hmm. Then Dweck's fixed mindset, creating that fear.
The terror of not being the smartest person in the room.
Yeah. And Erikson's unresolved stage resulting in feeling adrift.
The feeling of being adrift with no internal compass, it all links together in this psychological framework.
Okay. We've gone through the origins, the mindset traps, the identity issues, this whole journey of the smart kid paradox. So the big question now is, what can you actually do? If you're listening and thinking, yeah, that sounds like me, what's the way forward?
Right. It's not about blame. It's about understanding and then moving forward. The first step really is just acknowledging. Acknowledging those patterns of maybe feeling your worth was conditional, something learned way back.
Just seeing it for what it is.
Yeah. Recognizing your value is inherent. It's not based on what you achieve. Then actively, consciously work on cultivating a growth mindset.
How do you do that?
It means starting to see effort, mistakes, challenges, not as threats, but as chances to learn, to actually grow your brain. Lean into the struggle a bit. Don't automatically shy away.
Okay, so acknowledge the past, cultivate growth mindset.
Right.
What else?
Then comes the sometimes messy but really vital work of internal self-exploration.
Finding out who you really are.
Basically, yeah. Building an identity based on your own values, what matters to you, not just what gets praise. Discovering who you are when nobody's watching or expecting anything.
That sounds big.
It is big, and it takes time. And finally, try to seek purpose beyond just achievement for achievement's sake. Remember that generativity thing?
Contributing to others.
Exactly. Try to redirect some of those amazing talents towards making a difference for others in whatever way feels meaningful to you. That's often where deep fulfillment lies, in meaning, not just hitting the next metric.
That's really powerful practical advice. Acknowledge, cultivate growth, explore internally, find purpose through contribution.
It's a pathway.
Definitely. And just as a final thought for you to mull over, maybe something to reflect on after this. What if the greatest gift isn't actually being smart? What if the real gift is finding the courage to feel authentically lost for a while? The courage to actually dismantle that false self and start that challenging but maybe incredibly rewarding journey of building a true internal compass from scratch.
That's a deep thought to end on. It reframes the whole struggle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Look, it's definitely a journey, no quick fixes, but just recognizing these patterns, understanding where they might come from, that's huge progress. Hopefully this deep dive feels like a real first step out of that crisis, if that's where you are.
We really hope so. Embrace that process of self-discovery.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today, exploring the smart kid paradox.
Thanks for digging in with me.
We really hope you feel maybe a little less lost now and definitely more informed. We'll look forward to diving deep into another fascinating topic with you again soon.